Sometimes it's not heartbreak that stops you. It's the insult of being forgotten until it's convenient, until your pain can be turned into a performance. The sleek black envelope arrived on a crisp October morning, nestled between utility bills and a gardening magazine from Terrain. Nina Caldwell, 39, nearly missed it as she sorted through the stack at her kitchen counter, sunlight streaming through the bay windows of her Georgetown townhouse in Washington, D.C. But the gilded edges caught her eye, and she paused, her fingers hesitating over the elegant script embossed across the front. Landon Royce and Camilla Vance request the honor of your presence at their wedding. For a moment the world seemed to still. Nina blinked, rereading the names. Her hands trembled slightly, not with fear, but with a mixture of disbelief and irritation. Landon Royce, her ex-husband, the man who had once promised her the world before casting her aside in his pursuit of power, was marrying again, and he wanted her there to witness it. Her first instinct was to toss the invitation in the trash, but curiosity tugged at her. Nina sat down at the marble-topped kitchen island, the envelope still in her hand. She traced her fingers over the embossed letters, memories flooding back like a dam had burst. They had met during their junior year at the University of Chicago, where Nina had been a literature major with dreams of becoming a writer, and Landon was an ambitious business student with a sharp eye for startups. He'd swept her off her feet with his charm and unrelenting determination. Nina could still picture the small Italian bistro Trattoria Il Fiore, where they'd had their first date in the heart of Lincoln Park. Landon had been late, caught up in a meeting with his tech co-founder, but he'd arrived with flowers from a street vendor and an apology that seemed to erase all frustration. "I promise you," he had said over a shared plate of tiramisu, "one day we'll have everything we've ever dreamed of. You'll have the freedom to write your novels, and I'll make sure you never have to worry about anything." But that promise had come with a price. As Landon's ambitions grew, so did the distance between them. Late nights turned into missed dinners, and Nina's dreams of writing were pushed aside to support his relentless pursuit of success. Their marriage had unraveled like a poorly tied knot. By the time Landon's company, Royce Innovations, secured its first multi-million-dollar deal, Nina felt like a ghost in her own life. The man she had fallen in love with had been consumed by his hunger for wealth and status. The final straw had come during a heated argument when Landon dismissed her writing as a hobby that wasn't worth investing time in. It hadn't been the first time he belittled her passion, but that night something inside her snapped. The manuscript she had worked on for months lay open on the kitchen table, pages marked in red with condescending notes like too emotional and not marketable. He didn't just undermine her work, he erased her worth. When the divorce papers arrived, Nina had signed them without hesitation. She walked away with little more than her dignity and a burning determination to rebuild her life. And rebuild she did. Nina poured herself into her work, founding Pathlight Futures, a nonprofit that offered programs for underserved communities. Over time, her small organization grew into a nationally recognized initiative. She didn't just rebuild, she redefined herself. Every grant, every classroom, every thank you letter was a brick laid in the foundation of her new life. She stared at the invitation, her mind reeling. Why would Landon want her at his wedding? It felt less like an olive branch and more like a calculated move. Was it a subtle power play? A public reminder of what he believed she could never be part of? Knowing him, it probably was. He thrived on appearances, and what better way to flaunt his new life than by inviting the woman he had left behind? Her phone buzzed, pulling her from her thoughts. It was a text from her best friend, Jasmine Rowe. "Jasmine, brunch tomorrow. You need to spill the tea on that gala last week." Nina typed a quick reply. "Sure, and I've got something even juicier to tell you." She stared at the screen a moment longer, her fingers lingering. For a second she considered deleting the text. Was she ready to confront a version of her past wrapped in designer lace and polished lies? As she set her phone down, Nina made a decision. She would go to the wedding, not for Landon but for herself. She wanted to see with her own eyes the life he thought was better than the one they'd shared. And perhaps, just perhaps, she'd remind him that she wasn't the same woman he had underestimated. That night, Nina opened her laptop and began researching Landon's fiancée, Camila Vance. A quick Google search revealed dozens of articles and Instagram posts about the it-girl socialite. Camila was stunning, with a penchant for designer labels like Dior and Gucci, and a flawlessly curated feed filled with exotic vacations and red carpet appearances. Nina smirked. "Of course," she muttered under her breath. But as she scrolled further, something about Camila's polished perfection seemed hollow. There were no candid photos, no real smiles, just glossy surfaces and filtered lives. Nina had once lived in a world like that, until it cracked. Nina leaned back in her chair, her thoughts turning to her wardrobe. If she was going to attend this spectacle, she needed to make an impression. And she knew just the designer to call: Christian Siriano. The chapter ends with Nina dialing a number, determination sparking in her eyes. "Hi Megan, it's Nina Caldwell. I need a dress, something unforgettable." The steady hum of conversation and the clinking of cutlery filled the air as Nina walked into Bistro Lumiere, her favorite brunch spot tucked above a bustling intersection in DuPont Circle. The chic interior, with its sleek navy blue booths and warm brass fixtures, was the perfect backdrop for DC's polished elite to sip mimosas and swap high society gossip. But Nina wasn't here just for gossip. Not entirely. Jasmine Rowe waved her over, a radiant smile lighting up her face. Her auburn curls framed her sharp features, and her emerald green blazer matched her vibrant personality. Jasmine had been Nina's rock through the tumultuous years of her divorce, always ready with a bottle of wine or a well-timed reality check. She had a sixth sense for when Nina was slipping into self-doubt and never hesitated to yank her back out with sharp wit and a killer outfit. "Over here, darling," Jasmine called, raising her glass of Prosecco. Nina slid into the booth across from her, a soft smile playing on her lips. "You always manage to make me feel like I'm walking into an episode of Sex and the City," Nina teased. Jasmine laughed, raising her glass in a toast. "What can I say? I'm a classic Samantha with a hint of Miranda. Now spill. You said you had something juicy, and I've been dying to know all morning." Nina hesitated, glancing at the menu before setting it down. She reached into her purse and pulled out the sleek black invitation, sliding it across the table. Jasmine's eyes widened as she picked it up. "Landon?" she exclaimed, her voice just loud enough to draw a few curious glances. Her lips curled with immediate disdain. "That smug bastard invited you to his wedding? What's his game?" Nina shrugged, leaning back in her seat. "I've been trying to figure that out myself. He doesn't do anything without a reason." Jasmine's eyes narrowed as she scanned the invitation. "Camila Vance, isn't she that socialite who hosted the charity gala at the Willard last year? I remember reading about her in Vogue. Looks like Landon's trying to upgrade his image." She rolled her eyes. "Ugh, she's all silk gowns and empty sound bites. I met her once, she called me Janelle." Nina smirked, though there was no humor in it. "It's not like he needs to. His company's valuation hit the billions last year. He's got everything he ever wanted. Money, power, a trophy fiancé, and now he wants me to see it." She said it plainly, but the bitterness under her tone still burned like an old scar. Jasmine set the invitation down with a sharp tap. "So what are you going to do? Ignore it? Send a strongly worded letter? Hire a skywriter to tell him to go to hell?" "I'm going," Nina said, her voice calm but firm. Jasmine blinked, momentarily stunned. "You're serious?" Nina nodded. "It's not about him. It's about me. I need to see for myself that I'm past all of it, that he doesn't have power over me anymore." She paused, a glint of mischief in her eyes. "Besides, I wouldn't mind showing him what he gave up." Her lips curled into a slow smile, the kind she hadn't worn in years, and it looked good on her. Jasmine leaned back, a slow smile spreading across her face. "Now that's the Nina I know. Okay, if you're going to do this, you need to go all in. No half measures. What's the plan?" The two women spent the next hour crafting a strategy that felt more like preparing for a battle than attending a wedding. Jasmine sipped her Prosecco thoughtfully as Nina outlined her ideas. "First," Nina began, "I need a dress. Not just any dress, a showstopper. I'm thinking Christian Siriano, or maybe something custom from Oscar de la Renta." Jasmine nodded approvingly. "Good start, you need to. Remind everyone in that room, including Landon, that you're a force to be reckoned with." Nina nodded, and then continued. "Second, I'll arrive with someone. Not to make Landon jealous, that's not the point, but to show him that I've moved on, that I'm not stuck in the past. Jasmine arched an eyebrow. Anyone in mind? Nina hesitated. She thought of Miles Carrington, the charismatic business tycoon she'd met at a literacy fundraiser last spring. They had shared a few dinners, but she'd kept things light. Miles was magnetic, charming, and most importantly, respected. I might have someone, Nina admitted, her cheeks flushing slightly. Jasmine leaned forward, eyes gleaming. Please tell me it's Miles Carrington. Nina rolled her eyes, though she couldn't suppress a smile. We'll see. Perfect. Jasmine grinned. And the final step? She gestured for the waiter to bring another round of drinks. Nina's expression turned serious. I need to be prepared for whatever Landon throws my way. This isn't just a wedding. It's a stage. He'll want to show off to prove that he's won. But I'm not playing that game. She took a breath, her voice steady. I'm showing up for me, for the woman I've become. Jasmine reached across the table and squeezed Nina's hand. You've already won, Nina. He just doesn't know it yet. The days that followed were a whirlwind of preparation. Nina scheduled a fitting at Christian Siriano's studio in DC's design district, where the designer himself suggested a sleek crimson gown with a plunging neckline and intricate beadwork. This dress says power, confidence, and a touch of revenge, Siriano said with a wink as Nina admired herself in the mirror. Next came the details. A diamond bracelet from Tiffany & Co., a pair of Christian Louboutin heels, and a hairstylist appointment at Maison Patrice, an exclusive salon just off Connecticut Avenue. Every choice was deliberate, a reflection of the strength she had reclaimed since her divorce. As the day of the wedding approached, Nina felt a mix of nerves and resolve. She knew attending would stir emotions she hadn't faced in years, but she also knew it was time to close this chapter of her life, for good. On the eve of the wedding, Nina sat alone in her living room, a glass of wine in hand. The crimson gown hung nearby, a bold symbol of the woman she had become. She had become. She thought about Landon, about the life they had once shared, and the one she had built without him. Her phone buzzed with a message from Miles. Looking forward to tomorrow. I'll pick you up at 3. Nina smiled, a sense of calm settling over her. She wasn't walking into Landon's wedding as a scorned ex-wife. She was walking in as Nina Caldwell, strong, successful, and unshakable. The chapter closes with Nina standing before her bedroom mirror, holding her head high as she whispered to herself, "This time, I'm writing my own story." This chapter builds the emotional tension and sets the stage for the dramatic confrontation to come, while delving into Nina's motivations and preparations in vivid, realistic detail. The morning of the wedding dawned with a pale, wintry sun breaking through the clouds. Nina stood at her bedroom window, gazing out over the Washington, D.C. skyline. The city pulsed with its usual energy, but, for Nina, time seemed to have slowed. Today wasn't just another day. It was a moment she had been building toward since the day she signed her divorce papers. Her thoughts were interrupted by the doorbell's chime. Nina walked to the door and opened it to find Jasmine standing there, holding 2 coffee cups and wearing a mischievous grin. "Thought you might need a caffeine boost," Jasmine said, stepping inside. She handed Nina a blue bottle coffee cup and set her oversized tote on the entryway bench. "You know me too well," Nina said, taking a sip and sighing. The warmth of the coffee settled her nerves, if only slightly. Jasmine surveyed the apartment, her sharp eyes catching the crimson gown draped carefully over a nearby chair. "Wow," she said, running her fingers lightly over the intricate beadwork. "This is a statement. You're going to turn heads. That's the idea." Nina replied with a wry smile. "But it's not just about appearances. It's about showing myself that I'm not afraid of the past." Jasmine nodded, her expression softening. "You've come so far, Nina. Just remember, this day isn't about him. It's about you." By mid-afternoon, Nina was ready. She stepped into the heels, feeling a surge of confidence as she smoothed down the fabric of the gown. Jasmine had left earlier, promising to text updates from the venue. Nina's phone buzzed with a message from Miles Carrington. "Outside whenever you're ready. Take your time. No rush." Nina glanced at herself in the mirror one last time. Her makeup was flawless, a blend of subtle glamour that enhanced her natural beauty. Her hair, styled in soft waves, cascaded over one shoulder. She wasn't just dressed for a wedding. She was dressed for battle. not with rage, but with elegance. Not to destroy, but to remind. She had become the kind of woman people whispered about when she walked into a room, and tonight she intended for them to whisper louder. Downstairs, Miles waited beside his sleek black Mercedes Maybach, looking as polished as ever in a tailored midnight blue suit. He greeted her with a warm smile, his eyes lingering on her as she approached. "Nina," he said, his voice low and admiring, "you look stunning." "Thank you," she replied, a hint of a blush warming her cheeks. "You're not so bad yourself." As they drove toward the venue, Miles kept the conversation light, sensing her underlying tension. Nina stared out the window, mentally rehearsing her poise like armor. She could already feel the eyes, the comparisons, the whispered judgments. But for once, she didn't flinch. She welcomed it. When they pulled up to the Hay Adams Hotel, its iconic limestone facade glowing in the afternoon light, Nina took a deep breath. "You ready?" Miles asked, offering her his arm. "Ready as I'll ever be," Nina replied, taking it. The grand ballroom of the Hay Adams was a vision of opulence. Crystal chandeliers sparkled overhead, and the scent of white roses filled the air. Guests mingled, laughter and conversation blending into a symphony of wealth and privilege. Nina scanned the room, her gaze landing on Landon almost immediately. He stood near the front of the room, impeccably dressed in a tailored black tuxedo. His dark hair was neatly styled, and his confident posture exuded the same arrogance she remembered all too well. Beside him was Camilla, radiant in a gown adorned with Swarovski crystals, her laughter bright but hollow. They looked like a magazine spread come to life, and yet something about the image felt staged, forced. Nina felt Miles's reassuring hand on the small of her back as they entered. The room seemed to shift as guests noticed them, whispers spreading like wildfire. Heads turned. A few champagne glasses froze midair. Nina Caldwell, the ex-wife, had arrived, and she wasn't alone. Landon's eyes found hers, and for a brief moment, his polished facade faltered. He recovered quickly, but Nina caught the flicker of surprise, and something deeper, something almost like regret. Camilla turned, her expression slipping into something closer to irritation than welcome. She whispered something to Landon, who gave a tight-lipped response before excusing himself and making his way toward Nina. "Nina?" Landon said, his tone carefully neutral. His gaze flicked to Miles, who stood beside her like a sentinel. "I wasn't sure you'd come." He said it lightly, but the tightness in his jaw betrayed something less casual. "I wasn't sure I would either," Nina replied smoothly. "But I figured, why not? It's not every day you get to see an ex remarry." She said it with a smile that felt like silk hiding steel. Landon chuckled, though the sound lacked any real humor. "Well, I'm glad you're here. I hope you'll enjoy the evening." Miles extended a hand, his voice polite but firm. "Miles Carrington, Nina's date for the evening." Landon's expression tightened as he shook Miles's hand. "Of course, I've heard of you. A rival in the renewable energy sector, if I'm not mistaken." "Competitor," Miles corrected with a faint smile. "Rivalry implies I'm chasing something. I prefer to stay ahead." The tension between the two men was palpable, but Nina didn't flinch. Instead, she met Landon's gaze, her voice calm. "You've done well for yourself, Landon. Congratulations on everything." Landon opened his mouth to respond, but before he could, a commotion at the other end of the room drew their attention. Camilla had spilled a glass of champagne, her frustration visible as she waved over a server. The moment broke whatever hold Landon had on the conversation, and Nina turned away, her heart steady. As the evening progressed, Nina found herself approached by several guests, many of whom expressed admiration for her work with Pathlight Futures. One guest, an older woman in an elegant emerald gown, took Nina's hand and whispered, "You're the real success story in this room, my dear. Don't ever forget that." Nina smiled, her heart swelling with gratitude. She had expected this night to test her resilience, but instead, it was reaffirming her worth. Across the room, Landon watched, his expression unreadable. For the first time, he saw Nina not as the woman he had left behind, but as someone who had transcended him entirely. Nina stepped onto the dance floor with Miles, her laughter light and genuine as the music swirled around them. She felt something she hadn't in years: freedom. The evening unfolded in a rhythm of toasts, laughter, and clinking glasses, but for Nina, it felt like moving through a carefully choreographed play where everyone wore a mask. The grandeur of the event, the shimmering chandeliers, the meticulously arranged white roses, and the glittering attire of the guests only heightened the feeling of artificiality. She couldn't shake the sensation that every glance in her direction carried a whispered question or an unspoken judgment. Standing near the edge of the ballroom, Nina sipped her champagne, the cool liquid grounding her. Beside her, Miles was effortlessly charming, entertaining a small circle of guests, weaving humor and wit into their conversation. His presence was a steadying force, but Nina's mind kept drifting to Landon. She hadn't missed the flicker of something in his eyes when they first saw each other. Regret, maybe. Jealousy. It didn't matter. Not anymore, or so she told herself. Nina Caldwell. The voice was smooth, practiced, and unmistakably familiar. Nina turned to find Landon standing a few feet away, holding a glass of bourbon. His expression was unreadable, but his posture carried the confidence of a man used to commanding attention. "Landon," she replied, her voice calm. "Enjoying your big day?" He smiled, though it didn't quite reach his eyes. "It's been a memorable evening. I wasn't expecting you to come." "You invited me," Nina pointed out. "What kind of guest would I be if I ignored such a thoughtful gesture?" His lips quirked in what might have been amusement. "Touch. I'm curious, though. What made you accept?" Nina considered her response. She could have chosen something polite, deflective, but she decided on honesty instead. "To remind myself that I've moved on, and to see if you have." Landon's smile faltered just for a moment. He swirled the bourbon in his glass, his gaze dropping to the amber liquid. "I see you've brought quite the date. Miles Carrington, of all people. Strategic choice." Nina raised an eyebrow. "He's a friend, Landon. Not everything is a calculated move." "Isn't it?" he countered, his tone softer now, almost reflective. "We both know how this world works." She tilted her head, studying him. There was something different about him tonight, a vulnerability she hadn't seen before. But before she could respond, the band struck up a lively tune, and Camilla appeared at Landon's side. Her smile was tight. "There you are," Camilla said, looping her arm through his. Her gaze flicked to Nina, cool and assessing. "Nina, I'm so glad you could make it. You've certainly been the topic of conversation." Nina met her gaze evenly. "I imagine I have." Camilla's smile widened, though it didn't soften. "Landon mentioned you're running a nonprofit now? Pathlight Futures, was it? Such noble work." "Yes," Nina replied, her voice steady. "It's been incredibly fulfilling. Helping others has a way of putting things into perspective." Camilla's expression wavered, just for a moment, before she recovered. "How wonderful. We should talk more sometime. I've been considering starting a foundation of my own." Nina smiled, her tone measured. "I'd be happy to share some insights. Though I should warn you, it takes more than a name and a checkbook." The subtle barb wasn't lost on Camilla, whose grip on Landon's arm visibly tightened. "Excuse us," she said with a strained laugh. "We need to check on a few things." Landon hesitated, his eyes lingering on Nina for a moment before letting Camilla lead him away. Nina exhaled, the tension ebbing as they disappeared into the crowd. Later that evening, Nina found herself on the balcony. The cool night air was a welcome reprieve from the heat of the ballroom. The city stretched out before her, its lights shimmering like a sea of stars. She leaned against the railing, letting the quiet soothe her. "You were always good at making an exit." Landon's voice broke the silence. Nina didn't turn, keeping her gaze on the skyline. "Things never change." His voice was quieter than she remembered, like he wasn't sure if he believed the words himself. He stepped beside her, the faint scent of bourbon and cedarwood cologne wafting in the breeze. They stood in silence for a moment, the weight of unspoken words hanging between them. "I wanted to thank you," Landon said finally. "For what?" "For coming, for showing me," he trailed off, his voice thick with something Nina couldn't quite place. "For showing me that you're stronger than I ever gave you credit for." There was a flicker of guilt in his eyes, as if he was only just beginning to understand the depth of what he had thrown away. Nina turned to face him, her expression guarded. "Landon, you don't need to say these things. It's your wedding day." "That's just it," he said, his voice low. "This day, this whole life I've built, it's everything I thought I wanted. But seeing you tonight, hearing people talk about what you've done, I realized something. You found meaning, purpose. I've been chasing, I don't even know what anymore." He let out a quiet, shaky laugh. Success, maybe, control, some illusion of winning, but it feels empty. Nina's heart tightened, but she held her ground. You made your choices, Landon, and I made mine. I'm proud of the woman I've become. Her words didn't carry anger, just truth. He nodded, his gaze dropping. You should be. For a moment they were just two people standing under the stars. The noise of the world faded into the background. Nina felt a pang of sadness for what they had lost, but also a deep sense of gratitude for what she had gained. She had outgrown that chapter, and now, standing beside its author, she didn't feel small. She felt complete. I wish you happiness, Landon, she said softly. I truly do. He looked at her, his eyes filled with a mix of regret and something that might have been admiration. And I wish I'd realized you were the finish line, not a stepping stone. And I wish I had been the man you deserved. As Nina walked back into the ballroom, she felt lighter, as though she had finally set down a burden she hadn't realized she was carrying. Miles was waiting for her, his smile warm and steady. Everything okay? He asked, offering her his hand. More than okay, Nina replied, taking it. They stepped onto the dance floor, the music swelling around them. For the first time in years, Nina felt a profound sense of closure, and the freedom to embrace whatever came next. The reception was winding down. The grandeur of the event had softened, muted by the subtle fatigue of its guests. Nina could feel the shift in the atmosphere. The bursts of laughter had faded into murmurs, the lively music giving way to slower, more reflective melodies. She stood near the edge of the ballroom, a glass of champagne in her hand, observing the room with a quiet sense of satisfaction. She wasn't a participant in the spectacle anymore. She was an observer now, a woman who had come not to make a statement to Landon, but to mark the end of one chapter and the beginning of another. Not for him, for herself. As Nina considered quietly slipping away, Landon approached her one final time. His bow tie was slightly loosened, and the sharp edges of his demeanor had softened, replaced by something more vulnerable. He gestured toward a quieter corner of the room where they could speak without interruption. I wanted to catch you before you left, he began, his voice lower than before, tinged with exhaustion. Nina raised an eyebrow, but followed him, curiosity mingling with the lingering sense of closure she had already found on the balcony. What is it, Landon? She asked, her tone measured but not unkind. He hesitated, running a hand through his dark hair. I've been thinking a lot tonight, about us, about what I let slip away. He looked up at her, and for a moment the polished businessman was gone, replaced by the young man she had fallen in love with all those years ago. I never said it back then, but I'm sorry, Nina, for everything, for the way I treated you, for not appreciating what we had. Nina felt a pang in her chest, not of longing, but of bittersweet acknowledgement. I forgave you, Landon, she said softly, a long time ago, not for your sake, but for mine. Carrying that weight wasn't helping me. It was holding me back. He nodded slowly, his eyes searching hers. You're incredible. You know that? The things you've accomplished, the way people talk about you tonight, you've become everything I thought I was chasing. But I see now, it wasn't about the success. It was about the person behind it. Nina gave him a small smile, the kind that held a world of understanding. We both had to grow in different ways, Landon. What we had, it taught me strength, resilience. It taught me to believe in myself. I wouldn't trade those lessons for anything. He took a deep breath, as if letting go of something he'd held on to for far too long. Thank you, Nina, for being here, for everything. I hope you find the happiness you deserve. I already have, she replied, her voice steady. I hope you find it too. They parted with a handshake that felt more like a truce, a final closing of the door on shared history. As Nina watched him return to the party, she felt no sadness, no regret, only peace. Miles found her soon after, his presence grounding as ever. Okay? Miles asked, his tone gentle but inquisitive. Better than okay, Nina replied, slipping her arm through his. It feels like a weight has been lifted. He smiled, nodding toward the exit. Shall we? As they left the ballroom, the cool night air greeted them, crisp and refreshing after the heat and noise of the reception. The city lights stretched out before them, vibrant and alive, a reminder that life always moved forward. They walked in companionable silence to the waiting car, the hum of the engine blending with the distant sounds of DC, Nina leaned her head against the cool glass of the window, her thoughts quiet but content. The next morning, Nina sat at her desk, a steaming cup of tea beside her. Sunlight streamed through the windows of her Georgetown apartment, bathing the room in a warm glow. She opened her laptop and pulled up the draft of her latest article, a personal essay for a prominent magazine that had asked her to write about resilience and reinvention. The words flowed easily now, no longer tinged with the bitterness or uncertainty that had colored her earlier drafts. She wrote about loss and growth, about the unexpected beauty of finding oneself after a storm. And as she typed the final sentences, she realized just how far she had come. Later that day, her phone buzzed with a text from Landon. It was a short message, uncharacteristically simple. "Thank you for coming last night. Seeing you reminded me of what really matters. I hope our paths cross again someday." Nina read the message twice, then smiled before setting her phone down. She didn't feel the need to reply. The conversation they had shared the night before was enough. Weeks later, Nina found herself standing in the lobby of a downtown DC hotel, waiting for Miles. They were heading to a gala for Pathlight Futures, a celebration of the organization's latest achievements. When he arrived, his smile was warm and his hand steady as he led her toward the waiting car. "You ready for another big night?" he teased. "Always," Nina replied, her confidence unshakable. As they drove through the bustling streets of the capital, Nina looked out at the city she had come to love so deeply. She thought of the journey that had brought her here, of the woman she had become through struggle, growth, and rediscovery. The chapter ends with Nina stepping out of the car at the gala, her head held high, ready to embrace the next chapter of her life. Not as someone defined by her past, but as the author of her own story. The weeks following the wedding were a time of reflection and quiet transformation for Nina. Each day seemed to carry her further from the shadow of her past and deeper into the light of the life she had built. Her work with Pathlight Futures thrived. Her personal relationships grew richer, and the weight she hadn't even realized she was carrying finally lifted. But this journey wasn't without its pivotal moments, each one a reminder of how far she had come and where she was going. It began with a simple errand. Nina was walking through Kramer Books, one of her favorite places in Washington, D.C., searching for a first edition to gift a friend. The scent of old paper and the quiet hum of readers flipping pages filled the air, a soothing backdrop to her thoughts as she browsed the shelves. She heard a familiar voice behind her. "Nina?" She turned and froze. Standing just a few feet away was Camila Vance, Landon's new wife. Camila was impeccably dressed. Her coat was cinched perfectly at the waist, her makeup flawless. But there was an edge to her expression, a crack in her polished demeanor. Her eyes, usually guarded and confident, looked tired and real. "Camila," Nina said, her voice calm but curious. "This is unexpected." Camila's smile was tight. "I thought so too, but I couldn't let the moment pass. I wanted to apologize." The words hung in the air, unexpected and heavy. Nina arched an eyebrow but said nothing, letting Camila continue. "I know how I came across at the wedding," Camila said, her gaze dropping momentarily. "I was threatened, insecure. You walked in with all this presence, and I felt small. I'm not proud of how I acted." She hesitated. "To be honest, part of me hoped you wouldn't come, because I knew I wouldn't measure up." Nina studied her for a moment before replying. "It takes courage to admit that. I appreciate your honesty." Camila sighed, a hint of vulnerability breaking through. "For what it's worth, I think Landon realized something that night. He hasn't said much, but there's been a shift. I think seeing you made him reflect on the choices he's made." She paused, then added with a whisper of uncertainty, "And maybe on who he really still measures himself against." Nina nodded, a flicker of sympathy passing through her. "We all grow in our own time. I hope you find what you're looking for, Camila." Camila looked at her, something close to gratitude in her eyes. There was no triumph between them, just truth. Two women finally seeing each other beyond the roles they'd been cast in. "Thank you. And congratulations, by the way, on everything." As Camila walked away, Nina felt an odd sense of closure. Not just with Landon, but with the entire chapter of her life that had revolved around him. The annual gala for Pathlight Futures was one of the biggest nights of the year, held at the elegant Chiani on Pennsylvania Avenue. The event drew philanthropists, corporate leaders, and public figures eager to support the cause of literacy and education. Nina arrived with Miles, her crimson gown by Christian Siriano drawing admiring glances. The evening was a whirlwind of speeches, networking, and heartfelt moments. But the highlight came when Nina was called to the stage to accept an award for her contributions to social impact. Standing at the podium, Nina looked out at the sea of faces. "Thank you," she began, her voice steady. "This recognition isn't just for me. It's for the team that makes Pathlight Futures possible, and for every child whose life has been touched by the power of education." She paused, her eyes scanning the crowd. "There was a time when I doubted my ability to create something meaningful, when I felt defined by someone else's vision of success. But what I've learned is that true fulfillment comes from embracing your own path, no matter how uncertain it may seem." She didn't cry, but her voice caught just slightly at the end, the kind of pause that meant it was real, raw, owned. The applause that followed was thunderous. Miles met her at the base of the stage, his smile warm and proud. "You were incredible," he said, pressing a kiss to her temple. Nina felt a deep sense of accomplishment, not just for the award, but for the journey it represented. She had stepped out of someone else's shadow and built a legacy of her own. And this time, she didn't feel like she had to prove anything to anyone, not even to herself. A few days after the gala, Nina received a package in the mail. The handwriting on the envelope was familiar. It was from Landon. She hesitated for a moment before opening it. Curiosity piqued. Inside was a handwritten letter and a small leather-bound notebook. The letter was brief but heartfelt. "Nina, I saw the news about the gala and the award. Congratulations. I can't think of anyone who deserves it more. I've been reflecting a lot since the wedding, and I realized there's something I needed to do." Enclosed is the notebook where I used to jot down my ideas during our early days at the University of Chicago. Many of those ideas became the foundation for Royce Innovations, but I never acknowledged how much of that journey was shaped by your support, your belief in me. I want you to have it as a reminder that your impact has always been greater than you realized. P.S. There's a page near the back I never showed you. It's from a day I almost told you I didn't want the company more than I wanted us. But I was too proud to say it. You'll recognize it when you see it. "Wishing you all the happiness in the world." Landon. Nina traced her fingers over the cover of the notebook, memories flooding back. She felt no longing, only gratitude. For the clarity, the growth, and the life she had now. Still, part of her turned to that page, and when she found it, a single tear slipped down her cheek, not for what could have been, but for how far she'd come. One evening, as Nina and Miles walked along the wharf, the city lights twinkling around them, Miles spoke with a rare seriousness. "You've been through so much," he said, taking her hand. "But it's clear, you're not just surviving, you're thriving. I'm lucky to be part of your world." Nina smiled, squeezing his hand. "And I'm lucky to have you in mine." Their steps slowed as they reached the edge of the wharf park. Nina looked out at the skyline, feeling the weight of the past lift completely. She had faced the ghosts of her old life, and now she stood on the precipice of a future defined on her own terms. The chapter ends with Nina resting her head on Miles's shoulder, the city stretching out before them as a symbol of endless possibility. Chapter 7. Writing her own story. The early spring sun bathed Washington, D.C. in a golden light, its warmth a promise of renewal. Nina stood on the balcony of her Georgetown apartment, a cup of tea cradled in her hands. Below, the world bustled with its usual energy, but Nina felt a rare sense of calm, as if the city itself had paused to reflect. That morning she had spent time organizing her workspace, finally deciding to frame the letter and notebook Landon had sent. They weren't tokens of love or longing, but symbols of the growth and clarity she had gained. Her home office now held the physical reminders of her journey. A framed photo of her first Pathlight Futures ribbon cutting, awards recognizing her nonprofit's impact, and a growing pile of drafts for a memoir she had tentatively titled Finding Horizons. Later that day, Nina sat in a boardroom at the Penguin Random House offices. She had been invited to discuss her memoir with their editorial team, who had taken an interest in her story after her gala speech went viral. The editor-in-chief, a poised woman named Rachel Harrow, leaned forward with a warm smile. Nina, your story resonates deeply. Not just the professional success, but the personal resilience. It's rare to find someone who can inspire with such authenticity. I think Finding Horizons has the potential to reach a wide audience. Nina smiled, humbled by the praise. I've always believed in the power of stories to connect us. If sharing mine can help others find their strength, then it's worth every vulnerable moment. As they discussed the direction of the book, Nina felt a spark of excitement she hadn't experienced in years. This wasn't just about sharing her past, it was about reclaiming her narrative and giving it purpose beyond herself. A few weeks later, Nina hosted a private dinner at Le Mistral, one of her favorite restaurants in the city, to celebrate the formal launch of her memoir project. Jasmine and Miles were there, along with key members of the Pathlight Futures team. It was an intimate gathering, but every guest had played a significant role in Nina's journey. Jasmine, ever the life of the party, raised a glass to Nina, who's proven that strength doesn't come from never falling, but from rising every time, and to her memoir, which I know will inspire millions. The room erupted in cheers and laughter, and Nina felt a lump rise in her throat. "Thank you," she said, standing to address the group. "I wouldn't be here without each of you. You've reminded me that life isn't about the plans we make or the setbacks we face. It's about the people who walk beside us." The following morning, Nina received an unexpected email from Landon. The subject line was simple: "Thank you. Nina, I read about your memoir project, and I just wanted to say how proud I am of you. I've started my own journey of reflection, and I've realized how much I can learn from the way you've faced your challenges with grace. I'm also making changes in my life. I've begun mentoring young entrepreneurs, hoping to pass on lessons I wish I'd learned earlier. I owe much of that inspiration to you. Wishing you all the best in this new chapter." Landon. Nina read the message twice before closing her laptop. It was strange how life had a way of circling back, offering closure when you least expected it. On a bright Saturday morning, Nina and Miles drove to the Shenandoah Valley for a weekend retreat. It was their first real getaway together, a chance to step back from their busy lives and simply be present with one another. As they walked along a forest trail, the sun filtered through the trees. Nina felt a deep sense of peace. Miles reached for her hand and she smiled up at him. "You're quiet today," he said gently. "Just thinking about how far I've come," she replied. "For so long, I let myself believe I was defined by what I'd lost, but now I see, every step, even the painful ones, brought me to where I'm meant to be." Miles stopped walking and turned to face her, his expression soft. "And where is that?" "Here," Nina said, gesturing to the world around them. "Living fully, without fear of the past, writing my own story." He leaned down and kissed her. The moment was filled with the quiet joy of shared understanding. As they continued down the trail, the trees opened to reveal a breathtaking view of the valley below. Nina paused, taking it all in, the endless horizon stretching before her. For the first time in years, she didn't just feel like a woman who had overcome her past. She felt like a woman who had fully embraced her future. She felt like a woman who had fully embraced her future. Back in her Georgetown apartment, Nina typed the final sentence of the first chapter of her memoir. "The most important journey isn't the one that takes you somewhere new, it's the one that brings you back to yourself." She leaned back, a contented smile on her lips. Her story wasn't over, but she knew now that she was the one holding the pen. And this time, she wouldn't write in reaction to others. She would write in truth, in wholeness, in power. The story ends with Nina gazing out at the DC skyline, the soft glow of her desk lamp illuminating her face. Her story was just beginning, and the horizon was limitless. She closed her laptop and stood by the large window of her apartment. The city stretched before her, bathed in the golden hues of the setting sun. She held a cup of tea in her hands, her thoughts calm and content. Her journey had been anything but simple, filled with twists, losses, and rediscoveries. But as she stood there, she knew one thing for certain. Life isn't about waiting for the perfect moment. It's about learning to create those moments, to embrace every high and low, and to keep moving forward with resilience and authenticity. A gust of wind fluttered the edge of a photo pinned to her wall, an old black and white snapshot of her at a community literacy event, surrounded by smiling children. Nina reached out and gently smoothed it down. Still writing chapters, she whispered. But this time on my terms. Nina turned, her smile radiant, as if addressing a larger audience beyond the city's glow. Dear friend, sometimes life hands us silence where we expected answers. No neat closures, no dramatic final scenes. Just an invitation, like the one Nina received, not to look back, but to step forward. To face what hurt us, not to relive it, but to rewrite it. Nina's story isn't just one of heartbreak and healing. It's a quiet revolution. A reminder that growth often comes not with fanfare, but with stillness. The kind where you realize you're no longer waiting for someone else to tell your story, because you're the one holding the pen now. The Stoics believed that the very things which try to break us are the ones that build us. The obstacle becomes the way, Marcus Aurelius once wrote. And that's what Nina lived. She didn't dodge the pain. She didn't numb it. She used it, transformed it. She turned what once held her back into the very force that propelled her forward. And friend, you can too. This world may try to define you by what you've lost, but you're far more than the wreckage. You are what you rise into, what you choose next. You are still becoming, and that becoming is yours alone to shape. Like Nina, you don't need anyone's permission to begin again, just the courage to do it. So if this story stirred something in you, let it be more than just a feeling. Let it be fuel. Write your next chapter with boldness, with softness, with truth, because the best part, the story isn't over. In fact, it's just beginning. If Nina's journey meant something to you, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe for more stories that remind us. Healing isn't linear, but it is possible, and you never have to do it alone. We're here, riding with you, every step of the way.